Welcome to Mistakes Were Made, a podcast about non-monogamy for messy people like us. I'm Sarah, a queer therapist, writer, parent, and journalist.
And I'm her husband, Alex, a communications professional and educator.
And I'm Jessica, here, resident monogamist on the podcast, here producing off mic today because we have 4 mics set up.
Yeah. It's amazing because today is our first ever double guest episode. We have not one, but 2 guests, one returning, one newly being initiated to the podcast. And these are 2 people who sort of introduced us to polyamory. And I just wanted to make it as awkward as possible by making it sound like they might have introduced us in any number of ways, but no.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
It's true, though, when we first heard you all were open, we were both like, really? Oh. And I feel like you and I just like, Alex, our eyebrows kind of like wiggled at each other across that news. So, welcome, Zack.
You still just made it sound like we're having sex all the time.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Oh, sorry,
it's
yes.
It's called a curiosity
yeah.
gap.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes, our eyebrows wiggled, exactly.
It's
yes, and they continue to wiggle.
Welcome, Zack and Mads, our good friends, our parenting buds, our fellow book club dorks, queer happy hour organizers, and gateway guides to the wonderful world of non-monogamy.
Hi.
Thank you. Hello.
Such
I want to
gentle,
hear more
patient
about
guides.
the first time you learned that we were non-monogamous.
What was our mutual
Do you remember?
friends told us?
Do you remember that? Oh,
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Oh, because I thought we told you guys.
I don't remember.
Maybe you played it off really
Yeah,
cool.
you probably
like,
told us.
Oh,
and we were
really?
like,
Oh,
that's so...
uh-huh.
I'm so cool with that.
Totally.
Yeah.
I had heard of all of those terms before. I am not Googling them in the bathroom
Well,
right now.
well, I do want to talk a little bit about that later.
Yeah, I mean, my memory of finding that out is kind of vague. I don't feel like it was like a big explosion because you all seemed like cool and edgy and young anyway. So I was just like, yeah, I'm sure that's what people who are 6 years younger than us are doing all the time.
I just personally remember that it was very exciting because it was also just like the best daycare gossip I had ever gotten.
what?
Yes. For sure.
Oh my God.
100%.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both of you. So, yeah, we brought you on today because we love talking to both of you, and we talk all the time about non-monogamy, and because y'all have been doing this for a lot longer than we have, and frankly, a lot longer than a lot of people we know have. So, you're our resident experts.
Oh, great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah, love that.
Well, yeah, maybe we can start with... You can take off your coat if you want to.
Okay.
Were you, like,
I was
about to do
thinking about it, but I was like,
It's going to be too
Your
loud.
chance has passed.
While you're noisily taking your coat off, I just wanted to ask, like, for you to give us a little bit, like, obviously we know a little bit about this, but I don't actually know the full story. Like, what is the backstory? How long have you been non-monogamous? And, like, how has that kind of, like, landed at the relationship structure that you have now?
Yeah. I think... Well, I think both of us like to imagine that we are the people that bring it up in our relationship.
Just, like, simultaneously, you were both like...
No.
One.
No, but, like, in my head, I was, like, talking about it before we really, like, named it, you know? And I think Madeleine was much, like, clearer about naming that.
introducing the idea of being open.
Yeah,
Dating.
in terms of, you know, standard polyamory kind of stuff. Mine was more theoretical about, like, 2 people can't be everything for each other all of the time, you know, right? Does that make sense to you? You know, do you get what I'm meaning?
I did not.
Wait, so you had a monogamous period, like your relationship started out sort of defaulting to monogamy.
Yeah,
is
maybe
that
we
fair
should
to
start
say?
there.
Yeah, yes. We were, and we didn't have any conversations about that.
Like when you first started dating.
No. Like, is this a monogamous relationship?
I didn't know there was any other option.
Yeah, for sure.
We were 23 and 24. It was 12 and a half years ago.
Yeah.
And we just were like figuring it out. But I think I always joke that like I kind of had to be with someone that would have eventually been open to this. I'm not sure how long I would have lasted. And also, I had a lot of exes when we first met and we were living in New York.
We would run into.
Like everywhere we went, we would run into
befriend
someone I had
them.
dated. And so I think going into it, like even when we were monogamous, we still were very open. Like I knew Zack wasn't jealous, and I think if he had been, we wouldn't have made it. Period.
Yeah.
Like past the first year.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair to say. Because we would run into somebody and then you'd be like mortified and I'd be like, who is it? And you'd be like, oh, it's my ex's best friend. And then me and them would like get along swimmingly and then,
Yeah.
you know, stuff like that. And it didn't bother me, but you know, we also like weren't talking about non-monogamy at that point at all.
I do feel like maybe that's like a good kernel of advice, though, to think about, like, if you're ready for it, or if it's right for you. If, like, the idea of your partner having partners in the past and, like, thinking about those relationships makes you feel upset.
For sure.
Then, like,
Yeah.
that's probably a
Imagine
good
what it's
sign
going to
that-
be
yeah.
like when they have a current relationship.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, like it wasn't a shock for Zack to learn that I'm like a very curious person, and I love meeting people and I love dating. Like that was a known entity, and also Zack was my first serious relationship. So up until then, I had just kind of dated casually. I didn't have a serious partner ever, so yeah, it was very new for me.
and that was the exact opposite. I would like been in 3 relationships and they were all, you know, serious. I was under 20 at the time, but they were all at least a year long. And so when you're 19, a year-long relationship feels like a very long time versus, you know, 36 a year is like, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't even remember their last name. No, of course, that's a joke.
But anyway, the real thing that happened was we lived in New York, then we moved to Berlin in 2013. And I met this really cute German guy who was
The true gateway to
the true gateway is
Cute German
to
guy.
meet a cute German guy. And Zach was like, you know, he's flirting with you, right? And I was like, yeah.
Wait, like you were there, like watching him?
We met
flirt
him
with
together.
Yeah.
He was like a friend of a friend. I don't remember how we met him.
Yeah, I remember, but I'm not going to name names.
Okay. But
I
yeah,
don't remember
he and
his
I were
name.
like clearly kind of vibing, and Zach was like would tease me about it, and then you know it's Berlin. We were 25, so there was a lot of drinking and staying out late, and this guy was like, "Hey, I'm in an open relationship. Like, you should do that too. What do you think about that?" And it was like, "What?" And that sort of kicked off the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. You know, like us dating other people, that was the introduction to that.
What do you remember about what that felt like at the time? I mean, I know this was a while ago now, but I feel like your story into non-monogamy feels different than the stories I often am exposed to, I think in part because I work as a relationship therapist, but also anecdotally, a lot of people, their first conversation about non-monogamy is because someone was caught
Right.
cheating.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you all stand out to me as an example of a different way into it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little bit differently. Almost like I feel like a lot of people I talk to feel like it's wrong if the idea is introduced because you are into someone or because something happened with someone. And I don't think that's true at all. I think that's a really reasonable way for it to come up, and it makes a lot of sense that it would come up that way. It's not easy, and it wasn't easy for us. I definitely kissed that guy before we had like set any kind of parameters.
Yeah, and
But, you know, we had been talking about it.
but again, it's like, yeah, I think to answer your question about like how did I feel? I mean, the thing about that time that there were so many different things going on for us.
Yeah.
Like we moved to a different country. We couldn't find a place to like actually settle down in Berlin, so we kept moving apartments and stuff. And
It was the dead of winter.
And winter in Berlin hits very different than you expect it to. And I don't know, there was just so much stuff going on for us that it was like, that's another thing. Whatever.
Just another thing in the mix.
Like,
Yeah.
It felt almost like an opportunity to like change things up or to do something different because we both were feeling pretty crummy, I think. And
Yeah, that's a better.
How long have you been together at that point?
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember us having a lot of conversations, and this is something I like thinking about some of the things we did right, which I think we accidentally did do a lot of things right, and one of them was we had a lot of hypothetical conversations about like, okay, if I do this, if I go on a date with him, how does that make you feel? If I kiss him, how does that make you feel? If I sleep with him, how does that make you feel? Do you remember that?
Yeah, totally.
And
And-
it was sort of like we got to the bottom of it, and my interpretation was like you didn't feel like it would hurt you if those things happened.
Correct. I also think we asked each other, like, do you want to know? Mm-hmm. And I think those are conversations that everybody has in the beginning of non-monogamy. Like, do you want to know what I do with another partner or what? Like, where do you feel comfortable? And, I think here's something that's interesting. Like, my view of it has changed entirely about that perspective. I didn't want to know anything. I think that, like, when you're introduced to it, it's sort of like kind of, I don't know, it felt like kind of invasive for me to know. Yeah, and I do think that we accidentally doing things right is like my MO.
You're like, I stumbled ass backwards into doing non-monogamy really well.
I feel like I accidentally do a lot of things right.
I want to go back a second because like it does seem worth pointing out that like so you had just you had been together for 2 years and you had decided to move to another country together and then decided to open your relationship. I feel like that previous thing is significant because you had just made a decision together that was like about being like affirming your interest in each other.
Yeah.
And so it seems like
Well, we had already been living together in New York, and so like we knew that we didn't want to live in New York anymore. It was very hard for us to be there, and so it felt almost like easier to live somewhere else. It was very hard to move to Berlin. We had a terrible time in the beginning, but moving to Berlin together was sort of, I guess the point is like, you know that you guys are going to be
Yeah,
together.
there was a lot of trust. There was a lot of trust.
It's like feels different than being in a relationship for like 10 years that is sort of you're years away from the last like big sort of like affirmation of your interest in each other, and then somebody's like, I'm going to go date this other person. That seems very different than the beginning of a relationship and you like just moved cities together. And you're like, we're going to try this thing as well, but I can see how there would be fewer doubts about like your commitment to each other kind of.
Yeah, I mean, we were relying on each other very heavily in Berlin.
Yeah. And I think, I remember Zach joking about this early on. Like, I don't think it was that first person that I dated, maybe the second person I dated after we opened things up. And I was like sort of checking in with him, like, does this feel okay? Like, how are you feeling about this? And Zach goes, am I worried that you're going to leave me for so-and-so? No. And I was like, okay.
Yes.
It was really sassy.
That's a great flex, honestly.
I don't think
I'm not naming names, but yeah.
I don't think I would do that now. I would be like, please don't.
Please don't go, baby. Well, I think that there is something to this like big shifts or upheavals in life that open up the possibility of conversations about non-monogamy. I mean, this has been a regular theme in the podcast that lots of people opened up during the pandemic. Lots of people open up when they have young kids, right? So there's something about like these moments that are deep transitions or challenging that also offer kind of portals for thinking about life differently.
I think, like you're saying and what Alex was saying, like, you're just made a affirming, we're in this, right? So
But
it's okay to, like, step away a little bit, right?
But we were also fighting a lot. I don't want to
Yeah. No,
not
that
acknowledge
is
that.
true.
Our relationship was in a rough place. Like, we were committed to each other, but we were having a hard ass time. And
Yeah.
so it was a scary move. I mean, I don't think either of us were worried that we were going to break up,
No.
but it certainly wasn't like a light decision. And then the whole thing just tanked. Like, as your first relationship in non-monogamy does, it went
What?
Yeah.
No
pretty
kidding.
terribly, and was pretty short-lived. And then I don't think either of us dated anyone else for like another year and a half.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting topic that we can get into too, about like the sort of dynamics of our dating.
We moved very slowly in the beginning.
Yeah, that actually segues into one of my next questions. One of the broad questions I had was like, because you have a much larger like time period to draw from, I'm curious about what the different arcs or chapters of non-monogamy can look like, and the different phases together and individually, and just like periods when you don't date or one person doesn't date, or that kind of stuff.
There was a long time where it was only me dating, and that made me really nervous. And I sort of didn't believe Zack for a long time that he was really okay with it. And at the same time, I knew myself, and I knew it was safe, and that I was, not going to make any horrible decisions, and that it felt really good for me and was really fun for me. So that was definitely a phase where it was like very imbalanced. And I think a lot of people feel like it has to be equal. Doesn't. Then finally Zack jumped on the bandwagon. And that was a
probably
little
package.
scary, but also like, thank God. I was so relieved.
Yeah.
Just pausing here for 1 second
Sure.
to make sure that nobody rings the doorbell again. Was that a package, or was that someone who's going to keep ringing the doorbell?
Should I start over?
Yeah, I was thinking
Should
maybe
I
you could.
just go check?
I'm just worried that it's Ronnie.
Here. How about I unplug the door?
Okay, good idea. Unplug the door.
Oh, that's smart.
But yeah, I think if you, I can't remember where that thought started.
I can
but
prompt
seemed
it.
like an important one. So.
Okay.
Alrighty. So, Madeleine, you were mentioning that there was a period in the beginning when you were doing dating, and Zack, you were not. And I'm curious about what that was like between the two of you, what it felt like for each of you, and then how or when it changed.
Well, now I feel like you should answer.
Why?
I don't know.
Okay.
I lost my thread.
We'll find it.
Sure. In the beginning, Madeleine was doing the majority of I guess, our non-monogamy.
Your non-monogamous penance.
Yeah. She was dating people and I wasn't, and she had mentioned that she felt kind of like nervous that I wasn't totally, not dishonest, but that, like, maybe I didn't know whether or not that is really how I felt. And then I started, it took me so we started like with an open relationship in like 2014, and I didn't really date anybody for like 5 years. And then, my first experience was very bad. Again, like Madeleine said, the first time is always awful. And then, I don't know, then she sort of like became sort of relieved of like this pent up anxiety of like, does he really want to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
like,
that's what I forgot what I was saying.
yeah, even though my first time was bad, it
I was so relieved.
yeah.
I was like, thank God he wants to do this too. Because I thought it was just me. And it was still, I think when you start doing something like that, I feel like you all experience this too. Like you feel so like there's something wrong with me. Why do I want this? Why do I need this? And so the fact that Zack wasn't participating made me feel that even more, even though I knew I would be okay. But so when he kind of entered the court, it was a relief. But I think it's also important to note that like those first few years, we weren't like explicitly poly or even non-monogamous. It was really just like an agreement that if something happened, like it's fine. Like go for it. I don't really want to hear about it, but you know, life is short. You rarely get opportunities to like make out or do something fun with someone. So if it comes up, go for it. It was very like, it wasn't like a proactive.
Right. We weren't on dating apps or anything like that. But also I think that we didn't know any of the language of stuff. Like in 2023, you know, there's books you can read. And if you have friends who are dating people, they inevitably come in contact with people who are non-monogamous, especially here like in Seattle. And so like we didn't really know people that were dating. We didn't know that
except for the German guy.
Well, yeah, one person, but like
the original man,
the OG,
the Ubermensch of non-monogamy. Yeah, that's interesting. So you didn't have like there was no Zack and Madeleine to shepherd you gently into.
No, we had no idea. And then we had a child in there somewhere, so there was no dating happening around that time.
I want to ask about the period. Like, I think a lot of people will express skepticism around the idea of like a partnership where one person is dating other people and the other person isn't. So Zack, I'm kind of curious to like hear from you more about like what made you feel like you didn't want to, I guess, or what made you feel like comfortable with Madeleine doing that, or just what were your like feelings around that time? Like, it doesn't sound like you were coerced into it at all.
No. And like I had said, you know, when we weren't open, so this is like, I think this is also what Madeleine was kind of saying is like we were in an open relationship, like, and we weren't non-monogamous, we weren't poly, we weren't dating other people. What it meant was like these conversations that we had been having about like this is it, you know, this is your chance in life to try to be a person. Don't like throw away friendships or, you know, opportunities that might feel good. And I think just like my personality, I wasn't like seeking out those kinds of sort of non-monogamous relation type things in that way. I wasn't like, you know, flirting with people or whatever.
You didn't have a history of having really ambiguous relationships with the people in your life?
No.
Just running into exes.
Kind of dating them, kind of not, kissing your friends, and
Yeah, so I was very happy to kind of let Madeleine be the person that she was. Obviously, like, that's why we were dating in the first place. But I wasn't looking for that sort of stuff, and so like it didn't, again, we weren't like non-monogamous. It was this kind of like understanding that if this stuff happens to you, then go for it. And I wasn't looking for it, and so like, you know, I wasn't really investigating that part.
It didn't seem like you felt the imbalance. I was very aware of it.
Yeah, I think that's a lot clearer now.
And also, I wasn't there wasn't that much happening. It's not like, you know, it was like maybe once a year, you know, something would come up. It wasn't like how often is it that you meet someone that you can kiss without pursuing it on a dating app? Not very often.
Oh, yeah, without pursuing it on a dating app?
Yeah.
No,
and it's hard enough on a dating app, but like randomly meeting someone you're
without
into,
pursuing
like
it on a dating app, or without it being somebody who you probably shouldn't kiss because of like how you know them.
Yeah.
You know.
So it didn't come up very often. So for us, I think it was very like theoretical in the early days, which I think was really good for us. Like it moved very slowly, and we had all these conversations, and like we really, by the time we did start dating more proactively and like got on the apps and whatever, we really knew, obviously we had a lot of trust at that point and a baby. And I think we just kind of knew where we stood. Like, we knew what our values were and what we were looking for and what we were okay with and not okay with. So there were fewer surprises, I think, than there might be for other people. And also, like, neither of us are very jealous in general. So I think that's just a weird thing. That's like our weird superpower.
I kind of want to, like, I think I thought I knew when I started dating people. Like, so wasn't proactive. Did end up, like, not really a relationship, but did end up sort of exploring this side of me organically. That's the thing that ended badly. And I was like, okay, I'm interested in this. I'm going to get on a dating app. And then I did it and I felt terrible. And then I was like, I do not know what I want.
Yeah.
But, like, we as a couple knew what we wanted.
Yeah, we
And
knew
that's like
what was important for our relationship.
Yeah, that's
not
like
that
a
we knew
different-
anything about dating people or having a secondary relationship or any of that other stuff.
If I may jump in here and say that has been one of the things that I've really appreciated about being able to watch the two of you and sort of learn from watching you, is there is a distinction between what each member of the relationship wants and needs and what the relationship or the couple needs. And, like, being able to talk about those things in distinct and clear ways is really important. And I think for a lot of us who just go, like, smash cut from years and years of monogamy into dating app non-monogamy, it takes a long time to develop that discernment and that kind of communication with ourselves and each other. And there's a lot of learning it the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we learned a lot of it the hard way, too. You know, we just learned it 6 years ago instead of 1 year ago. But I also want to... Madeline was, like, a very strong advocate for, like... She just, like, immediately knew when, like, something was a little off or whatever, and she was just like, okay, what is it? What do we have to talk about? And, like
you would just have a gut sense that something didn't vibe right between the two of you about
anything, really. And, like, a
Yes.
lot of that was, you know, of course, as our relationship changed over time, some of that ended up being about non-monogamy, you know.
I am just going to do a quick timeout because it looks like it's possible that Curtis's caregiver got in a small accident.
Oh, no.
Out front. I don't think it's, like,
Is that really?
oh gosh, bad or anybody's hurt.
I don't know. I think he just decided to park
Did he
on
just
the
decide to
sidewalk.
park on the sidewalk?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's like this caregiver needs a caregiver of his own.
Oh gosh. Or is this someone delivering something?
No, that's definitely the
That's
caregiver.
the caregiver.
Yeah.
We should probably help Jess.
Yeah. Okay.
I think,
Hold on a second.
I think she has it under control.
You think she's got it under
Yes.
control? I'm usually pretty good at Jessica's body language, and
She looks pretty chill.
that's not Jessica's freaking out body
Yeah.
language.
I think she's just
Yeah.
waiting for him to get the shit out of the vaccine.
Okay. Then I'm going to take this opportunity to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
I really want to talk about, first of all, I love this idea of one member of a couple having that spidey sense that something is off and what it kind of feels like to bring that stuff up and how developing that over non-monogamy is valuable, because I feel like that's kind of what we were talking about this weekend. And I also want to talk about why is the first experience always bad? Because, like, that just resonates so hard, and I think that it's interesting to kind of, like, unpack why that is.
Okay. Well, we can like,
Yesterday,
come back
sticking
with
right
that.
at your
Zach told
jugular.
me I was being aggressive about my spidey sense. So.
No, I was talking about something else.
Save it for the tape.
No, we're not talking about that.
There's a lot going on out here today.
Yep.
That lady across the street's holding a baby doll, I think.
Yep, and they're squirt gunning.
Yep.
How you feeling?
I feel okay. we all kind of lost our train of thought for a little bit.
Yeah.
We're all
It's been
kinda
a little
like,
bit distracting here.
Yeah. I'm gonna use the restroom too.
Okay.
It was the afternoon the last time we came to. I feel like Mel was like 30% dumber in the afternoon than in the morning. It always ends up sounding okay, but I'm always just like, what were we talking about?
Yeah. Everything okay? Is he just leaving his car there?
I hope not. Yeah.
It was that-
fine to keep.
Yeah, we
going,
just
but,
yeah.
That's fine.
Was that
Okay,
that was him
everything
ringing the
okay?
doorbell?
No, actually, it
Oh.
was Ronnie.
Oh, okay.
It's so hard to find good help these days.
Yeah,
Right.
Sorry.
Also, life on 23rd.
Yeah,
It's
right.
just a dynamic experience. Excuse me. Why did you park there?
If I could go inside the mind of Peter, caregiver,
Yeah.
I would tell you.
What?
Yeah,
okay.
But, oh well.
Alright. As long as everyone's okay.
Yes. It's like I don't want him carrying all of these groceries inside by himself because I feel like it would be dangerous. But it was probably the worst possible time.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's he's also. I was giving me a hard time about the stairs.
About how our house has stairs?
Well, I
Yeah.
told him to use a wheelchair to
Oh, yeah.
come in and out. Anyways, because he's always knocking on the front door when I'm like
Yeah.
doing a recording.
Right,
and I'm
right.
like, can you go around back so
Yeah.
Curtis can let you in?
Yeah. Duh, Peter. Let's just make this a Peter hate podcast.
Oh my god.
I'm so. Did you guys go on break like right away after?
No, we
finished your
floundered
thought?
around a little bit, but it was sort of distracted.
And then I saw
Sorry.
that there was a
I'm
car
so
on the
sorry.
sidewalk, and I was like,
Sarah thought he ran into it.
interesting. I wonder if he got in a small car accident.
Okay.
I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, it's no problem.
Like, don't look. I'm like worried for him.
No. This is Curtis refuses to let you drive him anywhere.
Yeah, no shit. Smart.
I can see why. So I was like, well, at least I could go out and pick up the groceries, but anyways. Bless his heart. Bless his heart.
Sorry, Jess. That's stressful.
Thanks you all.
Sorry about that.
Very unprofessional.
Okay. Should we just start again from the top?
Yeah, honestly.
Top
Yo.
of what?
The whole
Just
thing.
kidding.
Y'all are doing great. I figured we could come back in and I would just be like, all right, so we're talking about the long arc of your non-monogamy and, I had these two kind of questions come up that I
Okay.
wanted to ask y'all. Alex, anybody else thoughts about where we know we want to go?
I had mentioned before that there's something that I think is kind of interesting. That like we started, and I've sort of talked a little bit about it. We started doing this like before it was sort of mainstream or whatever, and so like now people are doing it and they've like read books about it and like they know all these terms and they're like, oh well, you've been in it for a long time, like blah blah blah, and I'm like, I don't know what any of that stuff is.
Yeah,
like
right.
we're
Like-
just kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like that lexicon is being developed in real time, kind of.
Yeah.
And then new people show up to it and are like,
Hey.
feel like it should be really like established and should be like something that can be like handed to them. But
Yeah.
It sounds like you're kind of saying that
I
has
don't
never been
know
the
what-
case for you, and maybe
I don't know what those terms mean,
Right.
and so you'll still have to explain it to me. Maybe we do that, maybe we don't. I don't know, but I don't know. We don't have to talk about that. I think it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, I mean, I am curious to talk about that a little bit. I mean, you all were doing this before it was cool, before there were books, before there were podcasts, before there were like relationship anarchy charts and wheels and all of the things that everybody references now. What do you notice about that? Or like, how do you find yourselves in all of that, or don't you? What do you think are the advantages or disadvantages? Thoughts?
I think that stuff, I don't know, I find it a little overwhelming. I've still never read a book about polyamory. So yeah, I'm not, like I remember, I feel like a lot of dates I go on, I end up having to look things up that they bring up. the other person brings up, because they're like, oh yeah, kitchen table, this and that, and I'm like, what is that? So I don't know. To me, I just feel like we also don't fit into a lot of those frameworks, and I wonder if maybe y'all can relate to this because your parents, like, we do not have relationship anarchy. We do not, I don't know, do a kitchen table poly. We do not, like, I feel like all these things that are sort of like we do kind of like poly light, honestly. Yeah. It's much less, I don't know how to talk about it, but like life altering, I think, than the way other people pursue it.
I think it's really interesting to hear you say that, because I think a lot of what happens with a lot of that, like, terminology and stuff like that is just like gatekeeping, kind of.
Right.
And the fact that, like, you know, to me, you guys are like sort of like not the gold standard
but role
necessarily,
models.
but like role models are like the platonic, because you were sort of the first people that I knew closely who had this kind of relationship. So it's weird for me to hear you say like that you're like doing it light or something like that. Like, it really doesn't seem like that's accurate. You know?
I want to jump in with that too, because I think a lot of people say that about themselves. Mm-hmm. There is this kind of sense, and I'm curious to investigate this, that there are people out there who are doing non-monogamy or polyamory in the real hardcore way, and then a bunch of people who are like, I'm not doing that, I'm just doing my weird not real version.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think there's something going on with that. I don't know exactly what it is, but, you know, when I think about all of us, we have gone on trips with partners, we have met each other's partners, we have done overnights, we've had relationships that have lasted multiple years. Like, these are all significant and I would say like pretty challenging and transgressive ways of structuring your relationship. And yet we all have this sense that somehow it isn't as intense or authentic or rigorous as other people who are doing it. I don't have an answer for why that is, but I hear a lot of people say that.
But y'all do that stuff a lot more than we do. Like, we could probably count the number of overnights on one hand. We have only met a couple of each other's partners. I mean, those things have come up for us, but they're not like a regular part of it. So I think, like, I always joke, like, a lot of being poly for us now is just like, I have people that I text a lot, and sometimes we make plans. Most of the time they fall through. And theoretically,
it's just like calendar padding, basically.
I'm in a poly relationship, but like, I don't even know. It doesn't even actually happen that much anymore. People are so fucking busy. It's so weird. I don't know. So it's like, I mean, and that also is just like a moment of time that we're in right now. And there have been times in the past where I was like doing way more. Mm-hmm. So that, you know, that's how it goes. But it's interesting to hear you say that, because seeing other people open up their relationships, it always feels so intense. And I'm like, whoa, y'all are doing that? Right.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not a question of like volume or like intensity, and it's more a question of like openness. I mean, the things that it's interesting that the things that you referenced a second ago, Sarah, were the exact things in my head in terms of like, not like measures, but like the like big things are like, meeting another person, meeting your partners, meeting your metamors, and, you know, going on trips or sleeping over with people. Like, those kind of feel like the two like really big hard things that you like, or things that tend to be hard for people,
especially people with kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's also like, the thing that's very interesting to me is there's almost like one, maybe two definitions of what monogamy is, and there's infinite number of definitions of what non-monogamy and polyamory is, you know, like, so that's like a very interesting thing. And I kind of like I kind of disagree with Madeleine a little bit that we don't do relationship anarchy, because I think we don't, but I have a different relationship with everybody that I've dated, and that's like because we have conversations about what we want it to look like. And to me, that feels like anarchy, and that there aren't rules until we've made them, you know?
Yeah, but there's a clear structure. It is hierarchical. Like
Sure.
you and
Yeah,
I,
totally.
you always come first, and that's not going to change.
Totally. But like, even the definition of what relationship anarchy means is that's not like every relationship that you're in is anarchy. It's that like there isn't a definition for what it is until you've agreed to terms.
I don't even get relationship anarchy.
Well,
Obviously,
I mean,
I don't
that's
get
how I
it.
feel about it, and so that's what it means to
That's
me.
a great definition of it. I've heard like
Yeah, no, that
literally
was good.
two completely other
Yeah.
definitions of it. Like one where
That was the best I've heard.
none of your relationships like take precedence over other ones.
Yeah, that's how I was
And then
interpreting
another
it.
one where different types of relationships don't take precedence over. So like romantic relationships don't automatically trump friendships. Like those are two discrete definitions, and then you just gave another one.
Sure, but this is what I'm talking like. So this is also a humongous source of animosity with me and partners that I've had, friends that I've had. We're talking about stuff, and Sarah and I have actually talked about this a lot off podcast. I don't know. Can I say that?
See our future upcoming podcast.
About having terms that, like, if you're communicating with somebody and you think, I say relationship anarchy and I mean what I think it is, and the other person thinks it's one of these other definitions, like, you two are not talking about the same thing at all. And that, like, leads to a lot of problems. And it's a big hurdle that I just run into it all the time.
This is kind of a passionate subject for me because it again comes back to this idea, and I think it's one of the reasons why you all talking about non-monogamy is so interesting. Non-monogamy is inherently transgressive, challenging, new, frightening, right? There's not a lot of representations of it, and the first response everybody's going to have is, let's label the shit out of this. Let's give it terms. Let's talk about how to do it the right way. Let's talk about how to do it the wrong way, because it's transgressive and challenging and different. And I think like this kind of rush to define what it is and to create all of these like sort of boundaries and borders around it is more of an expression of anxiety than it is of openness. And I'm not saying that those things aren't helpful, that there's not a good reason to have them, that we shouldn't develop language, but I do think we need to be careful for exactly the reason that you're describing, Zach, which is we're talking about relationships and people, and the most important thing is that we try and stay open to the possibility that we get to create the ones that work best for us, and that we get to be responsive and communicative about that. And that's what I always want to be oriented towards, and to me, that is anarchic in its basic principles, is that it really is about people being responsible for themselves, caring for each other, creating reciprocal relationships that are full of like care and communication and that are dynamic and flexible. It's also, I think that people hear relationship anarchy and they're actually thinking like relationship communism, where they're like everybody gets the same or something, or that there's like this equality, this kind of like forced equality or like flattening of relationships.
Or they hear relationship libertarianism.
Or
I get to do whatever I want.
Right.
And nobody can say anything about it.
But anyway, I'm
Yeah.
glad we landed here. I actually have had multiple people send me their resources on relationship anarchy because it feels like such a confounding concept or term for me. And as far as I can tell, all of them are saying all kinds of stuff.
Right.
In a pretty chaotic
it's
way.
total anarchy.
It's total anarchy out there.
Isn't that the point? I don't know.
Yeah, but the other side of that is that part of being non-monogamous is you have to communicate really fucking well.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially if you have a very big, primary relationship like a family. And I think Zach and I have both done this well and done it terribly, where we've tried to have boundaries with people we've dated or like manage their expectations of what we can offer, or what kind of relationship, or figure out what kind of relationship we want to be in with other people, what we actually have capacity for. Like those conversations have to happen.
Yeah.
And that is doing it right. And it's like the terms I think can help, but yeah.
Yeah, but like the terms are mostly useful prior to having those conversations, which is basically like
Yeah.
you should be probably having them really pretty fast.
Yeah.
So it's like they're useful in dating apps, maybe, to be like,
Yeah, this
I
is
am
what
this
I'm-
way, I'm
Right.
looking for
Sure.
this type of thing, but like if nobody agrees on what the definitions mean, and I feel like most people who have like a lot of stuff on their app profiles that's like, very prescriptive, they don't necessarily know exactly what they mean by it.
It
And
often
it's like,
feels like it's an expression of anxiety.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like the last person that I was with made me feel bad in this way. So
Oh,
now
sure,
I'm just going to
sure.
telegraph that.
Overcompensating the other way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But also to your point about, are we doing it enough? Is it real? Is it challenging or rigorous enough? I really liked what you said a moment ago, Zach, where you're like, well, there's one or two ways to do monogamy, and there's infinite ways to do non-monogamy. And I think, like, even if all you ever did was have a bunch of sexy text relationships with
Yeah,
people,
totally.
that would be certainly enough to make a lot of people who think monogamy is the only way to have relationships feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
or
what's
even-
cool about it, is that that is poly.
Yeah, even a relationship where you're like, I'm okay with my partner like watching porn and me knowing about it. That is
Sure.
transgressive.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, totally.
Yeah. That being said, I do think there are a number of experiences we've had that are, I don't want to say unique, but like the harder, more deeper experiences that come with polyamory that
Yeah, for sure. Like,
shaped us, like heartbreak.
Yeah.
like comforting your partner who's going through a breakup is a very confusing thing. And like watching them date somebody that you sort of have some level of like mistrust for on some level.
Speaking of spidey sense.
Yeah. We were talking about spidey sense in our relationship and stuff, but like, everybody's met a person who like is like, I don't know about them, and somebody's like, well, I really like them and they're nice and they're kind to me, and you're like, well,
Yeah, what if your partner dates someone that you have that spidey sense about, and like where that's hard. Like, what is the line? How involved do you get? How much do you say?
yeah, do you let the person, I mean, we've experienced it, so we have had conversations about like, hey, I think you should watch out for these kinds of things.
But it was more of a retro than a.
Sure, but on also like, hey, next time, do you want to know?
Yeah.
Oh, that I have that feeling. Do
Are you
wanna-
gonna be open to
Right.
a conversation where like someone's like, I don't think you should date that person?
I would love to hear about that, because I think having the small sample size that Alex and I still have, it's hard sometimes to know like what things are actual like good instincts,
Right.
or what things were anxiety about non-monogamy. And I'd love to hear more from you all about like what advice do you have for communicating to a partner that you think someone they're dating is sketchy?
Or like tell us that, I mean, if you're comfortable,
Tell
just
us
like
the
tell us
story.
the scenario.
Okay, so we're not super comfortable telling you this.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it kind of stings, And so, like, it's not like... I think one thing that Madeline and I are not super great at, I'm going to speak for you a little bit, is, like, getting over it. Like, I don't know. A lot of stuff stays with me forever. And not like I, like, have these, like, strong feelings, but, like, I think about stuff all the time that, like... Somebody that I was in a relationship with, like, ghosts me hard. I, like, think about it all the time.
Yeah.
And, like, this thing, I don't know, it affected you quite a bit. And,
Yeah.
like, you're still oftentimes, like, bring it up, So it's not like...
Well, yeah, it's again, it's two separate things. There's like the relationship that I was in, which was a bad relationship for me. I was sort of blind to it because I was like, I don't know, had googly eyes for a long time, and it was like the pandemic, and it was a really confusing moment. And And then there was like the dynamic between Zack and me where he was like watching me get hurt and not knowing how to intervene or whether to intervene.
Yeah.
And then I think when it completely fell apart, I had a little bit of a feeling of like, well, why didn't you tell me? I was a little bit hurt by that. And I think that was probably one of the hardest conversations we had about this stuff. Because, you know, of course, in Zack's defense, he was like, well, it's your relationship. I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's not healthy. And I did try to tell you and you didn't listen.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding.
So, you know, I don't know. I don't know that there was anything that we could have done differently. But it was helpful to have that conversation. I think now if I would do it again. Oh, sorry. Did you want to say something else about that?
No, I was going to say like the same stuff. We did have conversations about it. Like this is to address specifically your question about like what advice. Well, like try a little bit of everything. Because like we did try to have conversations about it. And when you're in a relationship with somebody and you like, you know, goo-goo eyes, like you don't hear that stuff, right? And then it's totally fine to get upset with the other person for not telling. Like you're not in a space where you're like, I know what I'm doing, right? You know? And so like you're allowed to get upset about stuff. That's okay. Like as long as you don't like throw everything out the window.
I think this is one of the more interesting, less spoken about parts of non-monogamy that I'm beginning to understand more the longer I do it, which is part of what it does is open you up to make mistakes and to learn lessons that you maybe need to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
And that it's part of the learning too.
Yeah. And get hurt. And like even repeat patterns that maybe don't serve you, but you're not going to see that pattern until it hasn't served you 5 times, right? And watching your partner go through that is hard. I mean, it's one thing when it's you because you're like have, you know, your own relationship with yourself. But watching a partner go through that or sort of repeat patterns that you know maybe don't serve them, it's a challenge. But it is part of what we're signing up for as well.
Yeah, it's also easier to see that stuff. I mean, in a different person. Like, it's
totally.
impossible to see that stuff happen to you.
Absolutely.
I don't know why, but, you know, you're looking at somebody else doing the thing that you're doing, and you're like, why can't you see that? Like,
But this is part of how we uncover those blind spots.
Sure, totally.
I mean, that's part of the learning of non-monogamy is that we have those blind spots and we're like pushing into them, and that's how you learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
And definitely now, 2 years later, I can look back and feel grateful for all of it and not feel like I wish anything had been different. It was a lesson I needed to learn and a pattern of mine. But it was really hard at the time. And I think, like, I don't know, I guess the only advice I would give, I'm trying to think of, like, what I would have listened to. I think if you see your partner doing something like that, just, like, asking questions. 'Cause my big thing now is, and Sarah and I talk about this, like, ultimately, does the person any other partners you're spending time with, like, do they make you feel good?
Yeah.
Do you feel good after hanging out with them?
Right.
And the answer to that question with that person a lot of the times was no. And I think if someone, I don't know, probably not, but the only thing I might have been open to is like if someone had asked me some questions about like, hey, like I'm seeing you behave in this way, you know, rather than putting it on the person you're dating, but like I've noticed that when you see this person, you are upset afterwards, or this, you know, it shows up for you in this way. Like that doesn't seem good. Do you want to talk about that? And I think it's also very fair if one of your partner's relationships is impacting your relationship in a serious way. That is very fair to call out and like address. And I don't know that we got to that point in that situation other than me maybe just being really cranky.
Right. Well, I mean, that's an obvious way that it can be impacting your relationship.
Yeah.
Like if your partner's thrown off, like, and is just like unhappy or like preoccupied all the time, or like feeling unsafe, you know, in sort of like emotional ways around a relationship, then that's going to impact your entire family or like your unit.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think for us, a lot of that stuff was kind of hard to pinpoint specifically to that relationship because that was like during the pandemic. Like
The uprisings.
Everything was making everybody feel pretty bad. And so
feeling bad was the baseline.
And this relationship, for me, it was like the thing that kind of got me through a lot of that.
Yeah,
it was this
it was an
exciting
escape
person that I was like really infatuated with. Like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's. I don't think we knew
No.
all of that stuff when it was happening either, and it was like we called out the stuff that we could see, and that's as best as you can do, I think.
I want to maybe like shifting gears back to the question of like having a long-term poly relationship. I'm curious, like for you guys, what do you think 12 years ago, Zack and Madeleine, if they saw you now, like what would they think, or what do you think they would be surprised about? In terms of like the way that you're not just that you're old and have children and are broken people, but like
what are you talking about?
sorry, I was talking about myself. Sorry.
I think I would be like, hell yeah, girl.
Yeah, about what?
Get it.
Like you would be happy about how easy it is, sort of?
No, I think I would be really excited to know that like it's possible to live a life where you are doing so many things that you want to do and like living in a free way. I don't even think I knew it was possible.
Yeah, 12 years ago, I think I would not believe it for sure. I was
you would not.
serial monogamist, and like complicated relationship to myself, sex, desire, relationships to other people, like what it meant to be a friend, all these kinds of complicated feelings that are a lot clearer in some ways now. But I would recognize the person that I am, but I don't think I would believe that, I don't know, that this is really my life,
Yeah, that seems like a pretty great endorsement, honestly, to be like, my 23-year-old self would be really impressed with my 36-year-old self or whatever. I don't feel that many people can say that.
And I appreciate that because I think sometimes I feel a kind of anxiety about projecting into a long future with non-monogamy. I'm like, what does this look like when the kids are grown? What does this look like in 10 years? What does this look like when I'm 60? Am I always going to be doing this? Like it feels scary to me sometimes. And so it's interesting to hear you all talk about a longer arc in a positive way. And I'm also curious about how you think about like the next 12 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that all the time. Well, a big thing that I've been trying to do is be okay with things changing. Like, it's very hard for me to do that. And so, like, having these sort of, like, periods of reflection where we can talk about how things have changed over time and what that means for us. Like, it probably will not look the same in 12 years. Even in the last year, the way that I've approached things has changed. Mm-hmm. And so I think just like being how you get to be cool with things changing is beyond me. I don't have any advice for that, but like trying to figure it out for yourself, like accepting that change is God, right?
I know, I was going to say, you and I are just going to keep reading Octavia Butler until we figure out how to be okay with change.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, and so that has been a central theme in my life for the last couple of years.
It's helpful to remember that change is inevitable. Change is God, to quote Octavia Butler. Change doesn't mean the worst case scenario that I, Sarah Studeville, can possibly imagine.
Correct.
Which is, of course, the way my anxious brains work. And they're just like, oh, well, when you say change, that just means that everybody's going to leave you and you're going to completely die alone, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, obviously that's what we mean.
I don't really think about it.
Like the future
I think about
how
the future a lot, but I don't really think about the future of polyamory in our relationship.
Yeah, I don't either.
I think I just want to date as much as I can while I look good.
Dang.
The most honest thing that was ever said on our podcast.
Okay. Also, though, I was thinking about this with, I know we did an episode here recently about aging anxiety and like age gaps and stuff. I think that polyamory and non-monogamy, that is one of the things that it comforts me about into the future, is the idea that I'm not going to be the only one aging.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
so will a bunch of other people who are my peers. And it's nice to think that that won't just like pinch off any hope of like connection or romance or sex or like being still vibrant in that part of your life.
And the older I get, I feel like the hotter old people get to me and the less hot young people get to me.
It seems
cool.
totally normal.
Yeah.
You're
Exactly.
attracted to the
Tracks.
people that are your age.
Yeah, I mean it is normal, but I guess because there's like this cultural like idea that like younger people are like desirable, right? Or like youth is, you know, sort of like cult of youth, and like I guess you were kind of speaking to that as well, like pointed.
No,
towards
yeah,
yourself.
I think I would say I have. I mean, that was a joke, obviously, but I think I have more anxiety about losing my edge or not being desirable over time than I do about like any other aspect of non-monogamy.
And again, this is like, you know, you're afraid of losing your desirability. You're not afraid of not desiring other people that are aging with you. And like, we don't give ourselves the grace to like, oh, other people are still going to be attracted to me because I'm still attracted to other people. You know, like there's these like weird things that we have hangups on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still confused about why people want to date me now. So it's, I'm working on it.
I mean, this is all very relatable.
It is very relatable. And
I'm just like, I just need that affirmed over and over and over and over again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The dating helps with that.
Yeah.
And I'm scared of the day when I won't have that to like make me feel good about myself.
But doesn't non-monogamy mean that you always could?
Yeah.
I just heard a story from a friend about a close friend of hers in her 80s who is exploring like queerness and non-monogamy for the first time.
That's dope.
Sweet. And I was like, that's great.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that.
So.
Yeah. I have a couple more questions.
I do too.
That have
You go
come to
first.
mind.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was trying to think about like for a like poly-curious audience, or like, you know, somebody who's like thinking about non-monogamy or just kind of like starting in it, like the questions that they might really want to hear us ask you. And I think one of them, as a couple who have been together and non-monogamous for a long time, one of them is probably, has there ever been a time where you thought that like your relationship might be like fundamentally threatened by non-monogamy?
No.
No.
Clearly, it was a great question.
No, I think our relationship's been. You guys have talked about this on the podcast. The stuff that threatens our relationship is there.
Yeah, it's our relationship.
It's our shit. It's our own bullshit.
We're getting in the way
Yeah.
of ourselves.
It's not. Like I feel like if anything, one of the beautiful things about dating other people is that like. I don't know. It makes it makes our primary relationship continue to feel like a choice, and we don't take it for granted. Mm-hmm. And you always have this like, even I mean this is stupid, but like even having bad dates, you know, and it's like, oh that sucked, but I'm really grateful like I have this person to go home to, and
complain about it.
Yeah,
too, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had this thought this weekend. Madeline and I and Alex were away together with some other families, and we were referencing the time before Alex and I were non-monogamous when I found out that he had developed feelings for someone that he worked with. That was the closest that he and I ever were to divorce. You said that. You were like, you were pretty close to ending things. And it was certainly the closest that I've ever been, and I've never been anywhere near that since we've been non-monogamous. Right. And I think that's like a powerful thing to acknowledge, that for all of the ups and downs, all of the many arcs, and all of the challenging things we've experienced since then, I have never been I've never felt like we were fundamentally threatened.
Yeah. And I think the
that
reason that question came to mind is because I think sometimes people sort of enter into non-monogamy with the fear that, like,
It's an
on a long
assumption.
enough timeline,
Sure,
you're going to meet
yeah.
somebody who, like,
Perfect.
a perfect person who disrupts your slightly less than perfect,
I don't know,
acre
how-
relationship.
It never
or something.
happens in monogamous relationships.
Relationships ending. yeah.
People meeting other people, that doesn't
Right.
happen.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I mean, that's me, like,
Being defensive a little
Being
bit.
snarky.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
well, but it also, like, comes from my family, like, how much of this is from your family background and what you know about relationships growing up. I mean, for me, I never saw a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
Monogamy was trash. Like, people cheated on each other, people were mean to each other. Like, literally never pictured, honestly, I never pictured myself in a long-term marriage with anybody. I didn't think it was possible to have
Yeah.
a healthy long-term marriage because I had never seen one. And so this to me feels very much like a reaction to that. Like, this is the way I could do it. Not that anyone has to do it, but you know, as someone who did want to have a kid and, like, does love my partner, I want to make that work. And this is one way that it works for us.
Yeah, that's a great point. It does. It's also like, if you think about it, I think people end monogamous relationships that maybe shouldn't end because of the boundary of, like, they want to make out with a German guy. If that
Yeah.
hadn't been okay with Zach, then, like,
Right.
that could have been it, right? And that would have been,
Yeah.
a waste or whatever.
I think about
Yeah.
that all the time with our relationship, that if we had let that transgression end us, be the undoing of us,
Right.
all that we would have missed out on together. And that's not to say that divorce isn't the right option for some people, and, like, betrayal can just be something that you can't get over or whatever. But all that we would have missed out on.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that it happened, weirdly.
You're welcome.
And also that we kind of, like, followed that portal, like
Yeah.
we were
Yeah,
talking about.
it's pretty amazing. But I feel like, yeah, y'all don't give yourselves enough credit for that. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, Zach and I already started at a place of, like, not really believing in the traditional structures. And so we didn't have to work through that at any point.
Yeah, that's
and I
true.
think that's a really huge part of getting comfortable with non-monogamy for a lot of people.
I think also a
Yeah.
lot of people who are going to like ask that question or whatever, they may be, and this is what I have seen sort of anecdotally, like, people are in a relationship, then they're about to break up, and they're like,
Yeah.
well, what about non-monogamy? I mean, right? That's like, and then the first person they date, they're like, okay, well, now we're dating.
Right.
And
It's another version of serial monogamy, kind of.
yeah. It's just like a sort of like, maybe that's like a very Seattle thing to do, like an easy way to break up with somebody.
It's like super passive aggressive.
Oh yeah, so now we're non-monogamous, and they're my partner now. That's cool with you, you said.
I have known people that has happened to, though.
Absolutely,
So
it does
it's not,
happen.
but also it happens to everybody, or
Yeah.
to every type of relationship.
Yeah, that's true. Although I think the argument that we're making here is those are relationships that would have been struggling, were
Yeah.
struggling,
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah.
So, the last couple of questions that I have for you all, I think, well, one of the things I wanted to ask about is what it's like to watch your friends do it after you've done it for so long, and you have watched a lot of your friends be like, okay, we're doing it now, here we go.
Domino's been falling.
Domino's been falling.
Our social circle, for sure.
What is that like for you? What do you notice about it? What mistakes are we making?
It's very stressful.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep. I'm not naming names. I would say yes. Other people's relationships are a cause for stress for me.
You're not talking about Madeleine's relationship.
No. I think because, like, we're all close. you
Yeah.
know? And so like if somebody's in a stressful situation, that like it peaks out, you know?
Impacts all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like it just sort of like it kind of like cascades.
Yeah, well, I
outward.
think we all know that like dating and romance bring out different sides of people. And dealing with that shit is hard, and opening up your relationship is really hard. And so when you have that happening in like a very small community of friends, like it just starts to, like, everyone kind of gets involved, and you want to support your friends. And so I think, it was hard at times. I think I was mostly just like impressed at, you two and some other couples we've known, like how you were like, all right, we're doing this now, 3 dates a week, and we're on all the apps, and
when Alex and I go, we go hard.
it was like a job. And I just remember Zach and I, because like we were saying, it took us like 5 years to get to that point.
Right.
And honestly, the only reason I joined Tinder in 2019 was because I quit my job and I was going to grad school full time, and I was like, I have free time. This is so fun. I'm going to go on a dating app. And so I think there are a few times when we're like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do all that. Kind of to your point about like, this is what it means to be poly.
Right.
But at the same time, like, that's how people learn, and it's also really fun and cool.
Yeah.
As long as we're not dating the same people.
Which miraculously has not happened yet. And I'm knocking on wood.
There's a table right here.
Yeah, I wanted to say how much I have appreciated that along the way a couple of
That
times.
Madeleine hasn't dated the same people as her.
That Madeleine has been like, hey, Sarah, what are y'all trying to prove?
Yeah.
You
Chill
can
out.
pump the brakes, turn the volume down. Like, I don't really... Is this fun? Are you having fun?
Yeah.
Does this feel good? Y'all feel
Yeah.
good? And that has been a really, like, important check-in for me.
Right. I mean, I want to say that, like, the way that people... That like, monogamous relationships are, like, building a family in the kind of traditional way and, like, having kids can sort of... You don't know the way that people that you're friends with in that context show up in the relationship and dating context, and then that stuff is like re-revealed when they get back into it. And if they're like chaotic in that way, then they're going to be chaotic again. And if they're like very kind of like
It's
insecure and grabby,
We all regressed like 15 years. You
Yeah.
regressed to the last time you were dating.
That's also something
No
that's
way.
like, we're all we didn't grow up together and watch each other date and stuff like that. And so like to sort of find out who we are as adults who are like already have a partner, and then to see that is like, that's the part that's like kind of, whoa, you're like that.
Well, and it's been a role reversal because you two are younger than us.
Yeah.
And so, we're like, I'm not going to do the math on that, but you're younger than us. And I have often found myself going to both of you and been like, I'm going to need your advice on how the fuck to date people or like kiss people or do any of this stuff because I feel like a tiny child. And both of you have been really helpful in that department. I remember also Zach, like on one of our walks, Zach was like, do you like this person?
Yeah.
And I was like,
Right.
no, I don't. And he was like, stop dating them. I was like, right. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, but that's something that we check each other on too. Like, are you having fun?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, is this fun?
yeah.
Or is it seems like it's causing you a lot of stress, like, is it worth it? Because, I mean, not that it's not hard sometimes, but God, like, it better not make your life worse.
I will say the one thing I think, Madeline, I'm like very proud of us for never like, well, I don't actually know if this is true, but for never like ghosting on people. Like we're willing to have tough conversations, and even if that means that like, okay, this is ending or whatever with another person, like, I don't know, I only say that because it's like that feels like an easier thing to have happen in like a non-monogamous relationship than like two people that are like in a monogamous relationship. It's like very hard to ghost somebody if you're like seeing them 3 times a week or whatever, right? Like, did they die? Oh my God, like what happened to them? So
Yeah. But yeah, that's another thing of it is like you're just always getting exposed to this side of people that's like not always their best side. It's like a very vulnerable side, and people don't always make good choices when it comes to romance, and so it's like it's weird. And then it comes back to that thing of like, well, how much do I tell my partner? How much do I share? I don't want to. I feel like Zach and I run into this like, well, I don't want him to not like the person I'm dating or think I'm making a bad choice. I don't know.
I also am always worried about being embarrassed in front of my partner. Like,
what do you mean?
Like seeming unlovable to someone else or undesirable, or like, to use our son's word, pathetic.
So you got to give me a scenario because I'm not sure what you mean.
Oh, like if someone doesn't like me and I liked them and they're like, oh, I didn't feel a spark.
And you get dumped.
And I get dumped, or like,
You're afraid that Alex is going to be like,
what a loser.
She got dumped.
Sure.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, or it could be like not holding a boundary that you have for yourself.
Oh,
like
yeah.
That
you
too.
like express like, oh, I'm gonna, I'm not gonna sleep with this person on this date, and then you like do it, and then it's like you're really feeling cringe towards yourself. But if you have to tell somebody else, it's even worse, right?
Experience that.
You have an intimate witness.
That was one of your other zingers. I should write all these lines down that Zach pulls out on me. Oh my God.
But they're also like, I guess it's hard for me to imagine that me being embarrassed for me if
It's too complex.
I can't grasp it. Like
Really?
I don't know.
Oh, that's like so present for me.
Huh. Yeah, you don't have like ego relative to Madeleine?
That if somebody doesn't like me, I'm afraid Madeleine's gonna think I'm a loser.
A loser, yeah.
No.
Oh my God.
What are you talking about?
I feel like this is related to the you two not being jealous thing.
Yeah,
There's
that's what I'm saying. It's a weird thing with us. We really don't.
There is some sort of piece of like anxiety or like anxious attachment that the two of you just like don't seem to be bogged down in quite the same way.
In this part of our lives.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, we got loads of anxiety for other things.
I mean, Sarah, you and I are also like a little bit competitive with each other. Because we're like, have like a creative, like generative relationship that has a bit of a competitive streak to it.
Yeah, we don't
I feel
do
like
stuff together.
we should probably go to Jessica for that. Like Jessica's been the one that's been witnessing that for 15 years or whatever.
If anything, I feel like we're the opposite. It's like this martyr thing where it's like, no, you go have fun. No, you go out and have fun with that. You go on the date.
I've been going on so many dates. You needed to go on dates this week.
Jessica, you look like you want to say something.
Oh, no, I'm just amused by this.
It's interesting.
I can see all of these things sound so true. Like, I can definitely relate to that feeling you're talking about of, like, being embarrassed when someone doesn't like you, right? And I can also be like, that's so ridiculous. I can see how I would feel that way, and then I see, like, you feel that way. Any of you feel that way.
I want to make it clear. I'm embarrassed if somebody doesn't like me and I like them. I'm not afraid of Madeline, like, looking at me differently.
As a result.
Of that.
Yeah, we're both very susceptible to feeling bad about rejection.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Like, don't get me wrong. That feels awful.
Yeah.
And I like what Madeline was saying before is like there's sort of like a comfort in having a person be like, no, I still like you. You're great, And
Or just, I'm always like coming in so hot. I'm like, well, that person is an idiot. I can't believe they don't like you. What a loser.
Thanks, Mom. Well, you're too good for those kids anyway.
Yeah, totally.
They're just jealous, honey.
Yeah.
That's what it is. They're just jealous.
So I want to ask about the sort of like either mistakes that you all have made or kind of advice to your previous self. So like flipping my question from before on its head. How would you now advise your previous selves when you decided to be non-monogamous? Or tell us one really dumb thing that you did that is an embarrassing mistake you made. Take your pick.
had something, but I forgot.
I think I would have told myself to like, you can't tell. I know I would be telling myself this, but I still wouldn't listen to myself because it would be like me from the future, you know, whatever. I needed to get there on my own eventually.
I'm least likely to listen to myself.
Yeah.
Okay, you're wearing a disguise.
Sure. Yeah.
Of a very smart person.
A stranger comes up to me and is like, just go for it. Like, again, these are like the thing, like, change. Things are going to change. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time you do a thing. Like, it's okay to, like, try and be kind to yourself and to other people and to not succeed. And, like, what does succeed mean? Like, what does succeed mean in those terms anyway? You know, it's like, I've done so many things that I was like kind of afraid to do before we like opened up our relationship. You know, like I never ever approached anybody at a bar or anything before we did that. And then I did one time. And that was exhilarating and I'm good. You know, like I could have done that sooner. You know what I mean? I could have done a lot of the stuff sooner, and I don't know. It's just
definitely brought you out of your shell.
Yeah. So yeah, just kind of be okay with the unknown.
I feel like there was something I know I wanted to share, and now I can't remember it.
A mistake or advice to you?
Good advice, yeah.
Oh.
Well, you also referenced that the first time having a relationship non-monogamously is always a disaster. So you could just mind that if you want.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the things I tell people are things we've talked about. Like, take it slowly. You don't have to move fast. Be careful with rules. I feel like rules don't usually pan out. I feel like I see a lot of people suffering from rules that they set for themselves or their partners and that then inevitably get broken. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's like, yeah, like if you don't like it, don't do it. You know?
And not liking one part of non-monogamy doesn't mean you don't like non-monogamy.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of coming up for me as a mistake that was emerging as I was listening to you all that I made. That I'm like, I have to be in for everything or I'm not in for anything. And I was like, wait, why do I think that?
I think that's kind of what I was talking about. Like, you don't have to do it in the way that you have a perceived perception, you know, of like what is right or whatever. To just kind of, it's okay to like figure it out. So.
It'll come to me as soon as we stop recording.
Yep,
Of course.
absolutely.
That's how it goes.
If you do think of it, just like call it and leave it as a voicemail.
Okay.
And then it'll be like a cute thing that we can put in at the end. Okay, but I have to ask, do you really just don't get jealous and you don't get jealous and you never have gotten jealous and this is just like you don't have that gene? And you just don't have to work through that?
I mean, the only time I got a little jealous was meeting one of Zach's partners, and they were like giggling in the kitchen while they were making a salad. And I was like, how dare you?
I remember because you texted me and you were like, they're wearing a crop top and I feel like it's aggressive. And I was like, it is aggressive. But I was also just so excited that you felt jealous about something. I'm like, finally.
But like I said, we do keep things kind of separate. Like there's not a lot of overlap. Like you've spent some time with one of my partners.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like seeing Zach physically with, like, vibing with another person. Like, I feel like the thing people assume, or a lot of people ask me is like, well, y'all have threesomes? And I'm like, hell no, I don't want to watch that.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, like, that's not like Zack and my relationship and our home, like that's my safe space. You know what I mean? And so I think when I see it or like it's in my face, it's a little bit hard, but it's also not like intolerable, obviously. And it feels kind of good to be like, ooh. It's like what you were saying, like it shows that your partner is desirable, so that's kind of attractive
and exciting.
Yeah.
I get jealous of Madeline. Like, so, yeah, I don't know.
Like not her partners, but of
yeah,
her.
of her. Like, oh, Madeline's having such a great time. I wish I could have a great time, or whatever. And now I had something that I was gonna say, and I forgot.
Well, I remembered my thing, so maybe it's the same thing.
No, it's not.
Was it about taking turns?
Really cute.
No, it wasn't about taking turns.
Because that was something we had talked about before. That not the way you're thinking
No,
of.
it's funny that you guys are literally taking turns with each other right now.
Yeah. Go ahead, 'cause I just remembered mine too.
We both have ADHD. It's really fun. I highly recommend it. No, that was my other advice was like, don't stress about imbalances, especially if you're in it for the long term. Like we have traded places so many times. And like I was saying, like the first 5 years, I don't think Zack's dated anybody. And now, as I mentioned, I'm basically in some text relationships and Zack is out dating way more than me. And so like, I think that feels really good. Like, just taking turns being the hoe in the relationship.
Yeah.
It's fine, you know, and like I think it's natural to be sort of competitive, but sometimes you just don't have capacity, and it feels. And I do think like I am genuinely happy when Zack is feeling good. Like I do really. I don't know if that's compersion or whatever, but you know, I don't want to like kiss him a lot if he's like just been at a partner's house. Like I'd say my boundaries are more about like physical, a little bit like, ooh, you need to take a shower. But it does make me very happy when he like feels seen and feels sexy and is having fun. Like that makes me feel really good. And so I think getting to that place has been awesome, and being able for both of us to experience that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing of like me being jealous of Madeline. Like, I'm so happy that she's out having fun that like, I don't even know if jealous is the right word. I'm like excited that she gets to do that. And, you know, I don't really feel as much of that these days as I kind of did in the early days of like when I wasn't really exploring stuff, because I wasn't really like actively looking for it. So it was this like ideological thing of like, what is it? You know, that sounds so fun. But yeah, I think we both get joy from other person in our relationship, like having fun and enjoying themselves and like getting to do these things that they want to do.
Cuties.
Yeah, that all sounds pretty twisted.
What a couple of cuties.
Freaking weirdos. I did also remember this thing that I can't actually remember specifically how it related, but we were talking about like our overlaps with like, you know, kitchen table, non-monogamy, or like meeting partners and stuff like that. Like a lot of that is also us having conversations with the other partner, you know, like, hey, do you want to meet my family? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes my experience is like, no, not really.
Yeah.
And like, that's okay. But like, that's again, that like relationship anarchy, my idea of what relationship anarchy is, it's like a social contract between the two people that they've agreed on. And so, yeah, like you don't have to have like, polyamory isn't everybody living together, you know, in a weird polycule or whatever. And
we're
like,
probably close enough to that in our friend groups.
Right.
As
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the question I get when I tell people, like,
Yes,
because I'm always bragging about how
100%.
lucky I am. Like, I'm so lucky. I, have these people in my life that are really
Exactly.
close friends who are also poly, who are also parents with the same age, and our kids love each other, and it's like super magical. But we're not dating.
Yeah, literally every single person is like, have you dated them? I'm like, no. They're my
Definitely
friends.
But who knows?
Yeah,
God has changed.
I thought Sarah was coming in for a handhold.
I think she was.
I was going to take your pen away because you were
sorry.
clicking it.
Oh, that's what I thought too. I was like, wow, she's making a move live on air.
On air. Eyebrow wiggles, y'all.
Well, thank you guys so
Yeah.
much for
Great
being on the podcast. Great to have you back, Madeleine. Great to have you for the first time, Zach. Although you were like a ghost guest last time because we were talking about bell hooks in your book group.
Oh,
a bunch.
That's right.
So
And I mentioned
there was a bunch of like,
Yeah.
Zach said blah, blah, blah.
Oh, well.
This
Here
is
I
that
am.
Zach,
Yeah,
y'all.
he's famous. Famous bell hooks interpreters.
Please do not come to me. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, clearly neither do any of the rest of us. But yeah, thank you for listening to Mistakes Were Made. And I think we have one more episode this season, maybe. We'll see.
One more.
By popular demand.
Yep.
Demand it. You can find us on Instagram at MistakesCast, and we'll be back with another episode in a couple weeks.
Thanks, you too. It was great having you here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.